Hey everybody, today we're going to talk about what they're out of Venezuela and what you should stock up on for any kind of economic collapse. Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. I've been watching the news out of Venezuela a lot lately, and sometimes a real-life news story can be more motivating than any amount of YouTube videos or prepper videos you could ever want to watch. And what we're seeing in Venezuela is a really good example of that. If you've been paying attention to things they've been running out of as a new prepper, and that's really what this video is geared towards, you can put together a good collapse supply list that can see you through crisis, breakdown, a power outage, or total economic collapse. The things you need to remember about Venezuela is that as recently as 1970s, it was one of the top 20 richest countries in the world. So a lot of people like to say, oh, that could never happen in the United States, but, well, if it can happen in Venezuela, it could pretty much happen anywhere. And it really isn't a question of if, but when. These supplies in front of you are just a small representation, and again, these are representations. This is not what I'm telling you to go out and buy tons of. This is just a representation of things that might run out. We'll go through them later. They're representations of what you might need in an economic collapse type situation. But it is also a perfect example of things you might need in a breakdown, in a power outage, in job loss, anything. Okay? Now remember, economic collapse starts slowly. It could be described as hard times in the news or a stock market decline. It doesn't always start off with riots and blood in the streets and overnight turmoil. So one of the best ways to prepare as a new prepper, and even as an old prepper, is to look at what they're out of in Argentina and stock yourself up on those items. And they don't need to be expensive. I've purposely chosen some of the cheaper items in my storeroom to give you good representations. Okay, first thing we want to do is look at food, because the first thing Venezuela ran out of was food. The government took over, first of all, they cracked down on the ability to stock up on the food. Okay, they took over the food distribution. They took over the supermarkets. They instituted a fingerprint registry for buying food, basically making prepping illegal because you can only buy what they tell you can buy, and began to dole out the supplies. The government took most of the stores over, and then on top of that, they forced the farmers to sell over the majority of their crops for a price that the government chose to pay. These crops were then taken to market and marked up ridiculously and sold to people who found out overnight they couldn't afford to eat. So how do you prepare for that? Well, we start off with food. The first thing I tell people, if you're not really into prepping, okay, and you just want to have a good supply of food in an emergency, and you really don't want to think about it, get these. I'm going to put that into the light for you. Not particularly this brand, although this brand is perfectly fine. These are food buckets. They're 4-person, 72-hour food supplies. Okay, you can get 4 or 5 of these, stash them away, and you've got something, And this, again, is going out to people who aren't necessarily preppers, who just want to be able to protect their family in any kind of emergency. And food is your number one thing that you really need to start thinking about if you're going to start stocking up on items, okay? You've seen these online. You've seen them in the bigger bulk stores. I bought this one in Sam's, actually. I've even seen them in Walmart. It's not my first choice, but it's better than nothing when it comes to food, okay? Second thing is build a pantry. I have some items out here, and I'm going to knock down gold and silver. Just canned goods, go to the store every week. Buy an extra, whatever you can afford per week of extra canned goods. $5, $10 a week, That could make the difference in having a food supply when emergency strikes or disaster strikes, or even a total collapse of your government strikes, as opposed to having nothing, okay? And these are items that, gosh, they last. I've eaten Spam 10 years after I bought it. It's still as good as brand new, okay? Your last issue that you want to do, if you have a little bit more money and a little more patience and you're actually into prepping, is your freeze-dried cans, okay? Again, any freeze-dried can that you get is good. I am not in particular advertising Mountain House. I like it. They're very good. But there's tons of other stuff out there. There's the Thrive program. I mean, heck, you could start with a Thrive program and do it. I don't know how it works exactly, and it kind of strikes me as multi-level marketing, but there are people that do it, and there are people that make money doing it. You can start off with something like $20 a week and maybe get 1 can a week or 2 cans a week. Believe me, when I first started preparing in '98, I would go to the grocery store, excuse me, and spend $10 a week on canned goods, and it filled up a box, that I thought I'd never fill up in no time at all. So, we've got the freeze-dried cans. Now, gardening supplies. I'm going to move this out of the way here. Seeds, again, this is just a representation. This is how we store our seeds when we get them from the store. We get fruits from the store, or vegetables, anything that has a seed in it, we put it in a bag and store them. You can get non-hybrid seeds in any of the local stores, a Walmart, a Sam's Club, a Costco, heck, a Home Depot even has them, So you want to stock up on that. Soil, bug spray if you live in an area, or natural bug killer if you live in an area where you're really set by bugs, or pests. Anything gardening related. I mean, even something as simple as a shovel, My second suggestion on that is to test your garden out. Now, if you've watched my videos, a couple days ago I did a video on my little garden that's growing out there, and it's doing pretty good, but you want to know what grows in your area, You want to actually see, can I grow something from seed? If you can't do it, and if you're constantly having failures, then maybe you want to look into another option. Gardening isn't a solution for everybody, You may be living in an apartment, you may find it very hard to do. You may just not have the time to do it, You may be busy working a job, and you may not have the time to tend to a garden. So it's not the right choice for everybody, but it is another way to increase your food security. Okay, moving on. One of the other things that they're running out of in Venezuela is hygiene items, okay? Soap. Now again, a representation. I wouldn't wash myself with Fells Naphtha soap. But something like this is awesome because it can be used to wash so many things. From your clothing to outdoor stuff, anything you want to wash down really good, this is good soap. But, just going to the store and buying a 6-pack of your regular soap you use every day and putting it away, that could be one of your weekly preps. You could spend $10 on hygiene items, okay? Baby wipes, that's another thing that they're running out of, and this is a real big important one. Hand sanitizer. If you haven't watched some of the earlier videos from the Patriot Nurse, the biggest thing that's going to get people, as she has mentioned, is infections. It's not going to be the gunshot, it's not going to be the stab wound, you're not going to die valiantly in battle in front of your house. Maybe it's just that nick from that rose bush that gets you infected and you end up with MRSA and you end up dying from it. Keeping yourself and your hands clean. These 2 items can really help with that. Another thing, laundry soap. Laundry soap is in really short supply, and I picked this one here because, believe it or not, I buy these in Walmart. I forget how much they are. I think they're like $1.99 or something, maybe $2. They're really, really cheap. You can find this brand in particular in dollar stores as well, and don't discount dollar stores for prepping if you don't have money. If you're just starting out and you don't have a lot of money to spend, don't discount the dollar stores. But yeah, they're running out of dishwasher and dish detergent. I mean, laundry detergent. Dish detergent at this point I would consider a luxury. Laundry detergent. So it's just another item to grab. Okay, alternative energy. Now, if you've watched my videos, you know I have lots of solar projects. I have lots of cook stoves. I've made my own hobo stoves and cook stoves and rocket stoves. I have tons of videos on that. You can scroll back. And again, this is geared towards the new prepper. You don't need to go out and spend $50 on a propane stove. If you've got an area where you can harvest a lot of wood, you can make yourself a hobo stove out of a number 10 can or an old coffee can and be just as good. So let's move these things out of the way over this way, so we have a little more room. And I like doing videos like this because it gives you a good representation, and of what you can get and how easily you can get it. Medicine and medical care. All right, first aid kit is, of course, a representation. This is a first aid kit I bought in Costco a couple years ago. It's been rotated out. A lot of the stuff that's in it has been replaced. If this is all you can afford, and I think this was $29, that's fine. That's great. You're better off than 99% of the people in the world. I read a story the other day that I forget what it was, but it was some ridiculous amount, like 8 out of 10 people couldn't come up with $1,000 for an emergency. Well, it's the same way with prepping. I guarantee you, if you talk to a lot of people, something like a first aid kit is really not one of their top priorities right now. Everybody's just trying to get by. So if you can con yourself somehow to come up with a little extra money, and put some money aside and say, you know what, no matter what this happens, this is my prepping money and I'm not going to spend it, get yourself some first aid. All right, there is a good book and you can get it on CD. It's called Where There Is No Doctor. Stuff like that, education, real important, and read it before, Don't say, okay, I got my book, I'm ready. Read this stuff, watch the videos. As I mentioned before, Patriot Nurse is an excellent resource on YouTube with tons of information on medical stuff. Let's see, we want to stock up on things like pain relief, over-the-counter stuff, allergy stuff, colds, diarrhea medicine, inflammation, anything that takes down inflammation, aspirins, creams, anything over-the-counter, and stock up on sales. There's tons of sales out there, folks. And let me tell you something, for basic stuff like this kind of stuff, ibuprofen and all that, you can go to your dollar store and you can stock up pretty good. Keep an eye on expiration dates, but don't live and die by them. I've eaten aspirin that's 10 years past its best buy date, but I forgot to rotate it. I'll say more like 5 or 6 years. Perfectly fine, Aspirin, by the way, lets off a smell when you open it if it's bad. It's vinegar. It's a vinegary smell. You don't want to use it at that point. Some have said it's poisonous, some have said not, but regardless, these are items you can stock up on, okay? Some people purchase veterinary antibiotics. I'm not going to go into the legality of it, but let's face it, in an emergency, if you need to save your life or the life of your loved ones, all bets are off, okay? This is fish Cipro, okay? You will find that this stuff is very, very inexpensive. And you will also find, if you look up the markings on the pills, another good book I would tell you to get for this kind of stuff is a physician's desk reference. It will help you look up a lot of stuff when it comes to medicines. You will find that they're marked the exact same way. Some have even said they're made on the same lines. They're just not held to the same standards in packaging or FDA sanitation approval, maybe. If you're dying from a massive infection and you need antibiotics, I don't think you're really going to care, honestly. Is it legal? Well, it's kind of a gray area. I wouldn't set out with the intent of buying a ton of this stuff to resell, because that would make you an unlicensed physician, an unlicensed pharmacist. But to keep some and to keep it for emergencies, and if you have an understanding doctor, and I've done this with some doctors, where you can talk to them, and they'll either give you advice, give you dosages, or you might even be able to get your doctor to say, hey, I'm really concerned. I really need this type of medication or that type of medication. Is it possible I can get an extra month's supply? If it's not a narcotic, if it's something like blood pressure medicine or diabetes medicine, they'll probably give it to you. It probably won't be a big deal. Let's move on here. Oh, and make sure you stock up on things you regularly take. Like I said, blood pressure meds, diabetes meds. Even if you have to order them online or talk to your doctor about it, every little bit helps. Now's the time to get this stuff that can make things easier. This is another, the hospitals don't even have basic sanitation out there in Venezuela. So, if you can get yourself some Band-Aids, if you can't afford, say, ordering this stuff online, although it is much less expensive than antibiotics you'd buy at the store, if you can't do that, just get yourself some Band-Aids, some antiseptic creams, stuff that's cheap. Dollar store, great resource. All right, let's move on to that. Now, the last thing we're going to talk about is gold and silver. Okay, some people will say that gold and silver is not, you can't eat it. It's not a valuable resource in a collapse. Well, if you've watched and read some of what Fairfowl discussed in Argentina when they had the collapse in his country, gold and silver jewelry was really popular as a black market item for buying and selling, okay? If they're taking gold and silver jewelry, my guess is they'll probably take these. Some people say it's a store of wealth, not for bartering or trade. If you've got somebody that, say, is willing to barter or willing to sell items, and your country's currency is worth nothing, and you offer them, a 10th ounce or a half ounce of gold for something, chances are you might get it. If you've got somebody that maybe is blocking access to a store, like in Venezuela, where the military is shutting down grocery stores, Maybe you can get that guard to look the other way for a couple of pieces of silver, a couple pieces of gold. Maybe you can feed your family, you know. Again, I generally store gold and silver as a store of wealth. I don't tend to go overboard with it. I do have a good amount, but I don't go nuts with it. You know, I'm not going to keep thousands and thousands of ounces. It's more of a store of wealth, and it's more of a, for those little inconvenient situations like that, where you may need to pay somebody a bribe. You know, again, we're talking about what-if scenarios. If I told you 30 years ago somebody's going to fly planes in the World Trade Center, you would have told me I was nuts, and then it happened. It's what-if scenarios, you know. So, with all that said, we're going to move on to the final part here. So I hope I haven't bored the heck out of you folks. I tend to try to keep something in front of the camera. I don't like to just talk. So anyway, one of the things we're finding out, if you watch on certain parts of Facebook and Twitter, is that barter activity is exploding across Venezuela. You know, you'll see people bartering for, you know, feminine hygiene items. You'll see women trying to, you know, barter for diapers, for, you know, maybe some water or food. You know, it's things like infant formula. It's not uncommon to see people bartering for. If you watch some of the videos coming out of Argentina, you'll see the long lines at grocery stores. You'll see people, you know, buying things and bartering them. So, you know, it's something to think about. Again, I did a video on lots of good barter items. It's not an exhaustive list, but it's a pretty good list of things that you could possibly stock up on for barter. Some people may have an aversion to bartering, say, alcohol or cigarettes because they don't feel it's healthy. Again, we're talking about worst case scenario. We're not talking about, you know, I wouldn't go buy my friend a pack of cigarettes because I don't want him smoking. You know, we're talking about a worst case scenario collapse where that pack of cigarettes may buy you a loaf of bread. So, again, this is by no means an exhaustive list, but a start, a place for you to start your prepping goals. And mainly this is geared towards new preppers that maybe are watching the situation in Venezuela and going, oh my God, what should I do? You know, it'll serve you not only in a total crisis, but for any other disaster as well. The point of the video being both new and old preppers can learn something by paying attention to the news. You know, if I tell you now to go out and buy a first aid kit and you have it and there's, you know, an earthquake, well, you've got first aid. You know, you may not have everything you need, but you can stop bleeding, you can treat people, you can take care of minor cuts and bruises. So, learn all you can from what's going on around the world. It may be different in your location and country. You know, for the most part, people are the same, and they're going to need the same goods and the same items. So, if you can stock up by watching the news and watching what's going on in Venezuela, it'll probably do you some good. And especially for new preppers that are overwhelmed and think they need to buy 1 billion things, concentrate on the important stuff first, okay? Once you have that, then you can go off to things like gold and silver, guns and ammo. You know, of course, that stuff goes without saying that you're going to need that. And the last thing I want to talk about is skills, okay? Do you have a skill that you could barter for? Can you fix things? Are you good with electronics? You know, can you repair firearms? Now, that's a common, you know, thing that everybody's like, oh yeah, I'm a gunsmith, but can you really fix them? You know, I can refinish guns right here on this table, you know. I can do work with solar. I can get people electrical power, you know. So that's the kind of thing that you want to think about. You know, can you offer a service? Do you have a propane stove, a way to cook? Maybe nobody has it. So that's just something to think about. So anyway, thank you for watching. I hope I didn't bore you too much with talking. Really, you know, the items I showed you here are mostly representations of things to buy. If you can't stand beans and wieners, don't buy them. Anyway, thanks for watching, and we'll see you again soon.